So I've been working on this code all day, and I've ran into a few issues. Again, I've had the code compiling now, so with no compile errors for a while now. But when I run it, I still end up with some issues. Namely, when I try to, at this point, I kind of have diverted to when I take an item, or drop an item for that matter, but so far I've just tried to take the item. I don't, it always gives me the same message that that item doesn't exist, even though I know it does. So I had created a debug class a while ago when I first was writing this code to help me with debugging, and I kind of left it to the wayside in use of just simple printouts using stdcout. But I've reinstantiated my debug class with all of its constructors and that sort of thing, so that I can better keep track of things. So this is what I have so far. If I run the code, if I run the code and I enter a command like go east, and I don't want to do a riddle, and then if I look, I know that there's a jar here. See, there's I'm in the rabbit hole, and the location's the item is a jar, a glass jar. So then if I want to take the jar, normally this should allow me to take, and it doesn't. And so what's happening here is, ultimately this shows kind of the process of what's happening. I started off in the main method, and I call the run command passing in take jar, and then in the run command I end up calling the command auto add and or remove items depending on location, and that does its thing and then comes back to the run command. So now I'm back in the run command, and that only automatically added or removed items depending on my location, but at the start nothing gets added or removed. So then I'm back in the run command, and my input, as we can see up here when I called it, was take jar. And this is after processing the string. So the input remained the same, except I lost a space there. So then when I call the command, so I'm still in run command function, I then call split command into words, and it splits the command into the words take jar. I'm passing in the input take jar into the split command into words, and it splits them inside the split command into words function. I end up going in a while loop, and I just continually call the getLine function, passing in a string stream object, and I'm reading in from the string stream object, which was created based on this string take jar, and I'm assigning things to token based on the delimiter of a space. So therefore I get two tokens. The first token is take, and then I throw it through some processing, basically removing any delimiters. There was none in this case, but had I typed in any weird characters, it would still end up being take. And then I end up grabbing jar as my second token. And again, it remains the same after removing delimiters because I just typed it in properly. And then so now I have a word list that contains two values. So the word take and the word jar in element 0 and 1 respectively. Then I go back to the run command function. So I'm no longer in the split command into words. I'm back into run command, and I call the parse command function. And 2 just represents how many elements are in the word list vector. And we see there's 2, so that's what I pass. In the parse command function, I call the populate commands and items array list. And I have the name array list there because I was originally wrote array list down because I think that's what the assignment said to do. But array lists aren't really a thing really in C++. Well, at least they're not you use a vector, and I'm using a vector. So I've got that there. So populate commands and items array list, and then and then inside that command, so populate command and items array list. This is really just a helper function that ultimately just calls this function open file and populate array list. Again, it's not an array list, it's a vector, but I've named it this. Open file and populate array list based on this file, commands underscore verbs.txt, and this dot dot forward slash, this is required for cline, the IDE. And then I pass in commands, which is a vector, an instance variable of type std vector that will hold these strings, these commands. So I'm reading the commands in from this file and storing them in an instance variable vector of type string. And this just shows what's happening as it's doing that. I'm just reading, and these are all the commands: queue, quit, lay down, sit, all these commands. Grab, take, lift, carry, blah, blah, blah. Inventory, show, fan, score, guess, all that sort of thing. And then, still in the populate commands and array list function, I then call my open file and populate array list method again, this time passing in the file item nouns.txt, and still commands. I just want to make sure, because it shouldn't be commands, it should actually be nouns. I want to make sure that's just not something I'm doing in my debug. Hopefully that is just something I'm doing in debug and not actually in the code. So I'm going to grab this. So I pass in commands. Actually, let's look up this function. This is the function that calls this open file function. Okay, good. So in this function, let me just get rid of some of this junk. In this function, populate commands and items array list, it just makes a call twice. It makes a call to the open file and populate array list twice. The first time opening up this file, the command verbs file, and storing everything in commands, which is a vector associated with the commands. And then it calls it again, passing in this file based on items. So in my print command, I'm just, I have commands here, and that just had me concerned that would cause some issues. Because it should be commands up here, but it should be items down here. But it is, this is just how the printout worked. Because obviously that's just a hard-coded string literal. But anyway, I just fill up my array list. This is me filling up my array list of nouns. So story, east is a noun in this case. Paintbrush, paint, all that sort of stuff. Door, hat. Now, then, after I have these two vectors of type string, one for commands and one for nouns, then I call the parse command function, and that function ultimately just calls process verb and noun function. It's calling that because I have a verb and noun. If I just had a single command, it would call the process verb function. And then this process verb and noun function, basically it breaks down the words into a verb and a noun, take and jar, and then because of I have the verb take, it went into this if statement, if verb equals take, or any synonym of that, like get, grab, acquire. Then I call the process verb and noun function. So this is happening inside the parse command function. And then in the process verb and noun function, I'm calling this is happening in the process verb and noun function. It was called by the parse command function. And now I'm in the take jar function, because again, inside this if statement, I call the take item function, which passes in jar because that was the noun. And this is being called by process verb and noun function as the calling method to this function. In here, my current location is rabbit hole, so, and then this is just some printout stuff for me to keep track. And then in the take item function, I make a call to the get objects function, and then this is the objects that exist, just a jar, a glass jar, and that get objects function makes a call to the this game object, passing in jar. But as you can see, the actual printout, this is associated with the game printout, is there is no jar here, but it shouldn't be. And the reason being, is because where's the call happening? Right here. Nope. I'll have to search for it probably. No, I'm just gonna search it. Control F and so right here. So in this function, take item. Again, the current location is whatever it is, but this seems to be the culprit. This line right here is what's causing issues. So it's calling this game object, which we can, that method gets, this is ultimately going current location dot get game objects, and we know the current location is the rabbit hole. And then we're calling the get game objects function, get game objects on that location, and then that returns a game object list, which then I'm calling the this game object method on, passing an item name. So, and we know this game objects exist, and then so I'm calling this game object, passing in jar, which is the item. This should return an item, but fortunately the way I have this method set up, it returns, this game object returns a reference to a game object, or perhaps a game object pointer, which is why I'm dynamically casting it to an item pointer, but it's obviously not working. So this seems to be the culprit where there's something wrong. Need to fix. This is a problem. So I need to fix that, but that's where we're at right now. So I'm going to get in here and figure out why this is happening. Because so I can not get this message, there's no jar here. That's awesome. That's good. That's awesome. Sure like that.